From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Happy Labor Day and welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. Great to be with all y'all this morning. Back in the studio, thankfully. So we've got a packed show for all y'all today. Let's go ahead and get the show rolling. Taking the day off and you're catching up after the fact, that's fine. And I was debating whether or not to do a show this morning just for the sake of clarity here. But I realized that, cyber does not sleep. Neither do we. So let's go ahead and get the show going. Before we do that, I've got my double espresso this morning. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. Brilliant. Let's go ahead and break down this RansomHub ransomware gang that the U.S. government believes is behind the Halliburton cyber attack on August 21st. Now, there's no technical details in regards to the cyber attack. In fact, it's been eerily quiet, like almost no information's really coming out. Now, some anonymous users on Reddit were the ones that kind of started pointing the finger at RansomHub, and apparently then the government was kind of like, yep, RansomHub is the group behind this specific attack. And in a joint advisory late last week, right before the long weekend, CISO, FBI, Homeland Security, and MSISAC all issued details around the RansomHub attacks. The advisory describes their TTPs, shares some IOCs of their RansomHub store site currently lists 180 victims, but the government is likely aware of additional victims that may not be listed. A lot of them come from critical infrastructure. We're talking water, IT, government facilities, healthcare, financial services, food and agriculture, critical manufacturing, communication, and transportation. Now, there's no mention of victims in the energy sector, but nonetheless, that's a slippery slope for many in the cybercrime world. So, not a lot of details, even in the advisor around TTPs outside of them just taking advantage of specific vulnerabilities that exist within an environment. Outside of that, to kind of stay out of it. Now, if you've tried to fly recently, you realize how unpredictable and how unsoothing flight travel has become. It seems like 2020, when the world paused for a little bit, we haven't yet found our rhythm again to get back to it. Well, both airports in Langen in Germany and Seattle are experiencing significant pushback here, specifically due to various cyber attacks. The German air traffic control Deutsche Flugsicherung has notified that it fell victim to a cyber attack that paralyzed their office and communication through communication, but didn't impact air traffic control. Again, OT IT networks separate what exists in the OT side that kind of controls the communication, which is a separate network altogether by design, to how you run it. So DFS is based out of Langen, which is near Frankfurt, Germany's biggest and busiest airport. The attack on DFS was discovered last week. The firm said they're currently in the process of taking defensive measures to limit the impact. German authorities are on the hunt here. They're attributing this one already to APT-28, Fancy Bear out of Russia, which is associated with the GRU. However, they haven't given specifics to that, so there is that. Last week, we talked about Seattle Airport going through the port of Seattle, going through a cyber attack that really hindered air travel, maritime, and so much more. While the airport still continues to struggle, even on Labor Day, with some travelers having to arrive much earlier in order to mitigate delays. Warning messages were sent on Thursday in anticipation of the surge of people leaving for a long weekend. The airport remained open since the cyber attack, although some airlines are having to manually sort through bags. There's essentially, they've put up like whiteboard signs with instructions on them. People are using paper tickets. The biggest impact is for international or low volume carriers. Those airlines are not able to access the common use online systems and may be utilizing manual written boarding passes and luggage checks, which is causing a whole lot longer lines as TSA has to clear those, and they've got to meet a specific standards. The airports at Frontier, Spirit, Sun Country, and JetBlue and some international airlines are affected. They're urging travelers to check with those airlines on when to arrive at ticketing in order to get their bags checked in. And you can take a look here. They're actually writing on a whiteboard there with a dry erase marker where the flights are going and what gate they're coming out of. So you've got that, and then there's that guy with the cheesy smile right there going like, who knew when computers failed would have to do this again? The joy. The joy. The joy. That's the joy. All right. So all in all, this has been not an easy weekend for airports there as well. We continue with JAS Worldwide, now providing an update after suffering a cyber attack that took down pretty much all of their key services, including customer service, billing, payment systems, and data integrations with customers and vendors. All of those have now been somewhat largely restored. And when they say largely, I mean, we've checked and some are not still functioning in the restorations only a few days back. Again, backup and restore in cyber attacks is really the longest part. Taking everything offline takes 10 minutes. Bringing everything back online responsibly, making sure you've got viable backups, that's a whole other world. So all in all, they're starting to reassure customers that they're recovering. The attack, which occurred on August 27th, where the company experienced technical disruptions, they issued the standard statement where we've got an incident, we're working with outside experts, and we'll see how kind of that goes. As of right now, there's been no claim of responsibility for this cyber attack, although many predict that it is a ransomware attack there as well. Microsoft threat intel team is saying a North Korean threat actor was responsible for exploiting a Chrome remote code execution flaw patched by Google this month in order to use it for crypto theft. That vulnerability, CVE 2024-79 or 71, was patched by Google on August 21st. It was the 7th Chrome zero-day exploited. They assess with high confidence that the exploitations are attributed to a North Korean threat actor targeting the cryptocurrency sector for financial gain. Again, they're under sanctions, so they're going under stealing money. Really simple. That's what the North Koreans do. Keep that in mind. If you haven't checked out our Substack, check out our Substack, jamesazar.substack.com. Later today, we'll be dropping another article on the fight for free speech in France and Germany, so you can go France and Brazil. Sorry. What do Telegram and X have in common? And are we blind to our own history? So check that out, jamesazar.substack.com. You can find all the latest. Now, let's speed through a lot of these vulnerabilities and some compliance issues here. So one, Fortra announced patches for two different vulnerabilities in their file catalyst workflow. Those are CVEs 2024-6633 with a CVSS score of 9 or 0.8. Its default credentials for the setup for the HSQL database that's been published in the vendor knowledge base article. So you got to change that as well. And then there's the other vulnerability, CVE 2024-6632. That's a high severity SQL injection flaw on Catalyst version 5.1.7, build 156. That's the new version you want to be on for Fortra. So we keep talking about VMware and ESXis, and they really are a huge target for threat actors. They're a huge target for threat actors because once you target those, then it's significant. Well, a new ransomware as a service operation named Cicada 3301 has already listed 19 victims on its extortion portal, and it's quickly attacking companies worldwide. Keep an eye on it. So they're named after a game that was online nearly a decade ago. It was an elaborate cryptographic puzzle game. They're using the same logo for promotion. The company's like, hey, we've got nothing to do with this. So whoever's behind this really, really enjoyed that game. And we're kind of like, we're going to steal everything in order to launch this. Cicada conducts a double extortion tactic. They breach networks, steal data, encrypt devices. Then the encryption keys and threat to leak stolen data are used to leverage victims into paying a ransom. But they also operate a data leak site that's part of their double extortion key modus operandi. This is based on the fact that both their malware overlaps with the Black Cat Alpha V there. So, and here's where the overlap is. They're written in Rust. They use the Cha-Cha 20 algorithm for encryption. They're employing identical VM shutdown and snapshot wiping commands. They're using user interface parameters, the same file naming convention, the same ransom. No, that doesn't mean it's the same gang. It just means that someone within the decentralized part of the cybercrime that made up Black Cat used those parameters. They may have been responsible for those parameters, meaning that was their contribution to Black Cat, or they've stolen those parts as part of that and done that as well. Black Cat, as you well know, went after Change Healthcare, 22 million. Then they kind of had a fallen out. Change Healthcare, that's United Healthcare, was double extorted there as well. They use global skin VPN brute forcing techniques as well. And like many, they're using asymmetric encryption there as well. So you want to keep an eye on it. Again, they're targeting your ESXi environment. You want to get those TTPs and IOCs up and running. GitHub is being abused to distribute the Luma Stealer information stealing malware as fake fixes posted in projects commands. The campaign first reported by Teluxide Rust Library, who noted on Reddit that they received 5 different comments in their GitHub issues that pretended to be fixes, but were instead pushing malware. Again, any sort of way to do that. Clicking on the links brings visitors to a download page in a file called fix.zip, which contains a few DLLs and an executable named x8664w64.runlib.exe. That's the malware file there. The Luma Stealer is an advanced information stealer, and when executed, it attempts to steal cookies, credentials, password, credit cards, and browsing history from Google Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and other Chromium browsers. You want to keep your eye on that as well. Researchers are uncovering that slow Tempest espionage campaign is happening within China. This is a highly coordinated espionage campaign, according to Securonics. Securonics' researcher Tim Peck says that the goal of the campaign, which they named Slow Tempest, appears to be espionage, persistent access, and potential sabotage. But the access they gain have allowed them to launch ransomware attacks and exfiltrate data. The meticulous collection of data and credentials, combined with efforts to maintain long-term control over the environments, indicates that the attackers are not only interested in gaining access, but also sustaining that access to achieve broader strategic objectives aligned with state-sponsored activities. They've declined to share more information about the targets, but said it was aimed squarely at people based in China. The researchers made this assessment based on the fact that the phishing lures were written in Chinese and the infrastructure was hosted in China by Shenzhen Tencent Computer Systems. Again, kind of a reverse of what China does to the rest of the world. A data collection lawsuit against GM may be harboring a lot of things to connected vehicles, according to automotive experts. General Motors is confronting the lawsuits where allegedly the FTC said that they collected and sold the private driving data of 1.5 million people in Texas to third parties who used that information to score driver behavior and sold it to insurers to manipulate consumer insurance rates. The automaker allegedly didn't inform customers that it's selling their data or disclose that it has contracts with third-party companies to resell driving scores to insurers. GM said it shares the desire to protect consumer privacy, and it's reviewing the complaint. This lawsuit also highlights Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General, who said the state will hold GM accountable for egregious business practices. So, all in all, the case comes as the Federal Trade Commission investigation is also ramping up on the car industry. So, everyone is watching that lawsuit in Texas. For its efforts, California is trying to establish a first-in-nation safety measure to regulate AI and reduce potential risks. Part of that has to do with publicly disclosing safety protocols to prevent models from being manipulated to, for example, to wipe out the state's electric grid or build chemical weapons. The bill's among hundreds of lawmakers that are voting on during the final week of session. Governor Gavin Newsom then has until the end of September to decide whether to sign them into law, veto them, or allow them to become law without his signature. The measure that squeaks by the assembly on Wednesday requires final Senate vote before reaching the governor's desk. You know, I have a hard time believing that there's anything safe about this bill. I've read parts of it, don't really agree with it. It doesn't really address responsible AI. And again, we're trying to regulate one aspect of this, but we're really forgetting the fact that AI is a developing technology. And if you want to set safety mechanisms, you set that around data, training models, and use cases for now. And then you kind of look at it later on. Less companies are going to be inclined to do that. And you'll see AI companies will just leave California and not use California, because that's historically happened. Anytime California tries to push something through, then companies just move that to a more friendly regulatory environment until they can find a more suitable regulatory framework. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.